Hey everyone, welcome to Progressively Enhance Your DX with NX. My name is Craigory Coppola. I'm a software engineer on the NX core team here at Narwhal, and I've got to focus on the NX core, the plugin system, as well as issue resolution on the repo. I'm also the lead developer and maintainer of a community plugin called nx.net, which helps to add C# code as well as F# or Visual Basic into an NX mono repo. So let's start off with what is DX. Whenever we talk about DX, we're referring to developer experience. Microsoft defines this as how easy it is or difficult it is to perform the tasks a developer needs to do in order to implement a change, whereas Red Hat defines DX as a measure of how the code works with a developer. So to them, good DX means that the code allows the developer comfort and efficiency, whereas bad DX means that the code is restricting a developer, might create frustration. The definition we're going to go with is a little bit different since we're going to be focusing on how the tooling and environment the developer is working in might affect them. So we're going to look at three measures. We're going to look at how we can promote productivity for the developer, how we can promote stability for the developer, and how we can help that developer to maintain confidence. We're going to do this by looking at a sample project. This sample project consists of a core library, a CLI tool, and several plugins. So looking at this, we've got our core library, the CLI tool for it, and a few plugins, as well as a documentation site. This project is already set up with a basic NX setup, so we've got access to our project graph, we have implicit dependencies linking our documentation site to everything, and then real dependencies that NX has picked up for the CLI in the core, as well as each of the plugins in the core. So moving forward, let's look at how we can start adopting NX incrementally and what benefits we're getting at each step. So if this project did not have NX in it, and we're just looking at a project that was set up with Lerna, or a project that's not even been set up yet, we might use something like add NX to monorepo or the core preset to create a project. In this case, we're going to end up with nx.json only. We're not going to be using any of the plugins, and most of our target definitions are going to be set up with npm scripts and native tooling such as just CLI for testing, or the TypeScript CLI with TSC for executing our TypeScript compilation. But since we are using NX in this setup, we'll end up with access to the project graph immediately, which we just seen. We'll have access to NX affected for our tooling and build orchestration. And we'll also have access to some caching. So that means we'll have some faster CI and better local development since we'll have access to both the local cache and remote cache. And the project graph will allow us as a developer to be able to see what parts of the code base we're affecting when we make a change. The combination of these two will give us a lot more confidence as we'll be able to see that we're only affecting what we intend to. And we'll also be a lot more productive since we'll not be wasting time waiting for CI to complete. We'll not be wasting time waiting on things that we've already done locally to reoccur. But this repository is already a little bit past that and using what I refer to as basic NX. So this is what you get when you use npx create NX workspace, where you have an nx.json file as well as project.json, and you probably have a workspace.json file kicking around as well. You're using some of the core NX plugins like Narwhal.js, Narwhal React, or Narwhal Jest. You might be using a few community plugins. Your targets are ran via the executors from those plugins. To get to this, you don't have to use Create NX Workspace. You could also start from an Angular CLI project or install these plugins yourself. Either way. But what you get in a setup like this is you have access to code generators and scaffolding tools, which help out with consistency and confidence as well as productivity. It does this by making sure that you're able to generate your code in a very consistent manner. You can be confident that the tooling is set up correctly, and it helps you move quicker as well. You also get consistent tooling with these and standard options inside of project.json. So if you need to alter something about your build or your test or how your linting works, a lot of the times you can do this by only looking in the one file instead of having to hunt down for the specific setup. And you also get a little bit smarter hashing when you work like this, so you have more cache hits, which really helps with productivity. So what that means is that whenever you're running things like jest through the executors, you might have more cache hits than you would if you were just running it through an npm script, since we are able to specify a little bit smarter hashing algorithms in the executors. Looking at our sample project, this is where we are right now. So when we pull this up and we look at our main branch, you can see we have our nx.json file. We have project.json files that specify narwhal jest for that. And we end up with a few different things here. We can run the depth graph commands. If we look for affected commands, we can do like affected apps and give it a base. And it will print out those apps for us. We see that only the doc side is there, and that's because it's the only app. Whereas if we were to do affected libs, we can list out which libs were affected by our changes. And we get access to all of this with a basic setup. However, something like deployment is not handled right now. So there's not a deploy target listed or anything like that. And to move further and add in that target, we really need to start using something like run commands, since NX doesn't have a native executor. So let's see what a slightly more advanced setup might look like. So when we're looking at advanced NX, what we're looking at is something that might take advantage of task orchestration and target dependencies. We might be looking at setting up custom targets with run commands, and we might be adding something like distributed task execution on NX Cloud, which some other talks today might go into. So with these, whenever we're specifying target dependencies, we're telling NX how each of our targets relate. This lets us set up a really complete pipeline for NX, to where whenever we were to run a target, NX knows exactly what targets are needed before that. This really comes into play with things like distributed task execution, since we're able to tell each agent machine what it needs to run beforehand, and we can really split tasks up more effectively. It also helps with run commands and things like that, as our targets are now executing arbitrary commands, which might add support for technologies or processes that are what you as a developer in your workspace need, not necessarily just what NX supports out of the box. Setting up DTE and stuff like that also really helps with the faster CI feedback loop, which really helps boost productivity as well. So let's see what that might look like in our sample workspace. Looking back at our sample workspace, if we check out our advanced NX branch, we can see that we've added this deploy target with the run commands executor. In this case, we're just executing a simple command that's kind of a fake publish script, but this could be an actual npm publish script. We could be running a JavaScript file in here or anything like that to really do whatever we would like in this case. Additionally, in nx.json, we've set up a new target dependency for deploy, and we've told NX that whenever we run deploy, we also have to run build on that project. And NX already knew that when we run build on a project, we also have to run build on that project's dependencies. So with this setup, if we were to run NX deploy CodeRub, which is our CLI tool, we can see that NX was able to know that it needed to run a few tasks. So we see running target deploy for project CodeRub and 2 tasks it depends on. We see that it built the CodeRub project and deployed the CodeRub project. The one thing we're not seeing in this list right now is that it also built the core project, and it was able to pull that all from the cache, except for the deploy target. That deploy target was not pulled from the cache. We can see that here, or if we were to pull up this NX Cloud Run details, This is because in our task runner options, we don't have deploy specified here, and I wouldn't really recommend doing that either. So where would we go from here? At this point, we have a pretty advanced NX setup. We're telling NX how we want our tasks orchestrated, but when there's a few things that aren't quite ideal. Like I mentioned, this workspace takes advantage of several plugins for the CLI that it has inside of it, but it doesn't really have anything for NX inside of it. So for like example, we have this Azure DevOps plugin, and we have some basic stuff in here where we're defining our plugin. And if we look at our Jira plugin, we have sort of that same setup code. But anytime we want to create a new plugin, we're having to create it based off of just the standard JavaScript library templates that NX gave us. And we could extend that just to be a little bit nicer. So let's talk about how we can do that. Moving forward from Advanced NX, we get to Custom NX. This is where you might start taking advantage of things like local plugins, project inference. You might have some custom executors and generators. You might be including some non-JavaScript languages, and you're making NX work for your technologies. So at this point, you're taking all of those DX benefits that we had for things that NX supports either through Narwhal or through some community plugins, and we're boosting that to work for what we want. So we might be doing things like extending the dependency graph. We might be adding some custom hashing for our targets. And we might have other executors that are handling tasks that are very specific to our workspace. In addition, the custom executors and generators will really let us tailor that generated code for exactly what we're wanting in our workspace. Let's take a deeper look at how that looks for our sample project. In our sample project, if we check out our custom NX branch, we can come in here and see this NX plugin project that was created. For the NX plugin project, we have set up project file patterns, which tells NX that we are adding targets to projects that contain this file. And we have a function that registers these targets. So previously we were having to add this little deploy target to all of our projects, but now we can have NX know to do that automatically. If one of our projects had a deploy script which differed from the rest, they could specify this target themselves in project.json just by adding it like for another target, how we did previously, and it would overwrite our inferred target here. Additionally, we have a generator for our plugin. And what this generator for a plugin does is it lets us run and generate these files based on some JavaScript templating. So for example, if we were to run nxg at coderub /plugin test, we will create a new plugin that matches the kind of templating that we've been doing in our other workspace plugins. We can see we get a plugin file here. We get the basis of a CodeRub plugin. We get some boilerplate in here, and we automatically get a models folder with an empty config model for us to come in and fill in with our properties needed for that plugin. So this makes it really easy to set up exactly what we expect these plugins to look like in a consistent manner. This really helps with the developer experience by boosting productivity as well as confidence in a developer's code. Without setting up a custom generator like this, your developers will have to generate the library. They might be copying and pasting things around the code base, and things might just not quite end up exactly how you want. One of the other cool things with this is that you can generate some unit tests that are specific to this setup. So we might be setting up a unit test specifically for how this plugin was to process assignments as an example. This really helps increase confidence not only on the developer level, but at the organization level, as we know more of how our code is formatted in the entire workspace. It helps with uniformity, which helps with the speed at which developers can make changes, and it really helps just keep everything working how you expect. In addition, whenever we generated this NX plugin, we get a build executor. We're not really doing anything in this executor, but we could work on this and have it be something that runs like our publish script. And if we were to do that, instead of generating a deploy target in our index with run commands, what we could do is we could actually specify that local plugin. Like that. So when we do that, what we end up with is the ability to run that workspace executor. We still get our target dependencies that we set up before, so we can come in here and make sure that those are still present. And we can see that whenever we were to run an X deploy test, which is our new project, we get that it's running that deploy target as well as both tasks it depends on. We can see it ran the core build, we can see it ran the test build, and we can see it ran that test deploy. We can see that our executor ran in our local plugin, and we're able to just really tailor our workspace to exactly what we're wanting to go on. So now that we've seen how each of those levels of adoption for NX have played out, let's kind of look at what each of those meant for us. So whenever we first started with NX, before we started using plugins at all or anything, we already had access to NX's cache through both the local cache and the remote cache with NX Cloud, and we already have access to the project graph. Those both help us immensely with productivity and confidence. And then as soon as we added in a few more things to get access to NX's generators, we also helped with just overall confidence in the code that the developers are writing and how quickly they can get it put out. Intelligent hashing with the basic setup also brings in some things that speed up our test operations in CI and locally, since we're not rerunning them quite as often as we may otherwise. Taking it a step further, we were able to bring in some more plugins with advanced NX that gave us access to some custom commands through Narwhal Workspace run commands and similar. And you can also do some things with the tailored scaffolding using workspace generators here. And then in a custom plugin workspace, you're able to bring in some dependency tracing that you might not otherwise be able to do. So this is things like being able to process the dependency graph and pick up dependencies that NX doesn't know about. In particular, this might be picking up on whenever a plugin is pulling in a dependency based on an artifact from another target or something like that. And we also seen this negative configuration aspect. So just to really highlight that real quick, whenever we come back into our other workspace, we can look in our project.json files for all of our projects, and we can see that we don't have a deploy target anywhere, and that we're only getting that deploy target because of our register project targets function. By doing that, we've effectively cut all of this from every project.json file in our workspace. And we're able to do that for other implementations too. We just need to do some more clever string replacements and things like that to fill in our options blocks in those cases. And by doing that, we get rid of a lot of extra configuration. So even if we were using something like npm scripts, that deploy script would probably be listed in every one of our package.jsons, and we can see that it's simply not needed now. So with all of these improvements to DX, NX can really just help as a repository grows from minimal, basic, advanced, and all the way up into custom NX. So I really hope that this was helpful. My name is Craigory again. You can find me on Twitter, GitHub, and you can also join the community Slack if you need help with any of these cases. I hang out there. A lot of us other Narwhal folks hang out there as well. And it's just a really good spot to get help from both us and the community as a whole. Thank you.